On this episode, Christian Wood is officially off the free agent market. So where to now for the Warriors with their vacant 14th roster spot? Plus, NBA 2K24 is officially underway. We'll have a look at some of the official player ratings for the Golden State Warriors. Yes, welcome back to the Golden State with Mates podcast as I sit here on a Friday night Australian time wearing a Phoenix Suns jumper. Apologies if you're a Warrior fan and that offends you, particularly with opening night coming up here, the whole KD, CP rivalry that we're going to have here between the Warriors and the Suns. Looking forward to the battles this season. But I've got a heap of, Warrior rival apparel in the Suns, Kobe jersey. I've been to a Clippers game and bought a Kawhi jersey. So I got a jersey collection. I'm not sure it's too offensive, but I'll start off with that. Anyway, let's get into it. So a little over 48 hours ago, we had a couple of little Woj bombs. Not too big, but just a couple of little ones for, what it is, September here. You're not going to expect too much news, particularly back-to-back like we did. The first one, Christian Wood signing a 2-year contract with the Los Angeles Lakers, second-year player option. And the second one was Danny Green signing with the Philadelphia 76ers, which I had discussed the potential of Danny Green on the Warriors previously, not on this podcast, but on Blue Man Hoop, but not really a player of note to the Warriors any longer. So not much of an impact there, particularly going to an Eastern Conference team. The fact that Danny Green's 35, coming off a major injury. Christian Wood is obviously the potential difference maker here from a Warrior perspective. The fact that it would have been nice probably to have him on the Warriors, but not only that, obviously going to the Lakers, going to a Pacific rival that they're going to see 4 times during the regular season. And just his talent as a player. And, initial thoughts on this. So it's $2.7 million deal for next season and then a $3 million player option for the second year, which if Christian Wood has any realm of a half-decent year, you'd be surprised if he picked that one up. It's quite comical to see the varying reactions here between Laker fans who believe that this is a championship-winning move, that this solidifies their rotation and their championship core, and Laker haters who think this is absolutely nothing, who don't like Christian Wood at all and think he's going to make no difference to the Laker chances. In reality, it's somewhere in the middle, but I actually side more so with the championship move part of it. Now, is Christian Wood going to be the difference between the Lakers winning a championship or not? I don't think so, no. But you can't deny that I think that this is a good move, because if I look at it and think if the Warriors had signed Christian Wood to this deal, I think Warrior fans would be a lot like the Lakers in terms of seeing this as a fantastic deal for the franchise. Christian Wood has his detractors, there's no doubt. Some of his performances in the past, I'm not his biggest fan. He puts up numbers. I don't think he's impactful to winning. You look at him over the years. Has he played a playoff game? I don't think he has. You look at his time with Dallas last season, 16.6 points per game, 7.3 rebounds, 51.5% from the field, I think 37.5% from three-point range. Absolutely fantastic numbers. The reality is also that they were worse when he was on the floor, and that they went from being in the Western Conference Finals against the Warriors in 2022 and a year later failed to make the play-in tournament. Now, I'm not saying that's all on Christian Wood, but we're starting to get a trend here of places that he goes to struggling to find the success that you would think may accompany a player of Christian Wood's talent. When the Mavericks signed him last or traded for him last offseason, they would have expected for this guy to come in and add to the kind of Western Conference final team that they did have in 2022, obviously minus Jalen Brunson, who left for the Knicks. And yes, Christian Wood had his moments, had some big games, put up numbers, as I just spoke about, but his impact on winning is very unsure at the moment. In fact, it's probably going the other way, where we're just seeing him as an empty calorie guy who isn't impacting winning. Now, is he impacting losing, I guess is the question mark. Well, when you can sign him basically on a minimum contract, I don't see how that's a negative. Unless we think this guy is a huge problem culturally in terms of a fit there and and his presence in the locker room, I just don't see how it's a negative in any way, especially for a Laker team who, like the Warriors, needed some big man depth behind Anthony Davis, who we all know is quite injury prone, and does prefer to play power forward, although we've seen last season he's probably more happy, I guess, to play center than what we've seen in the past. And then they've obviously signed Jackson Hayes in free agency as well, who, look, I don't hate that pickup. It's okay. Again, I don't think Jackson Hayes is too much. He's very athletic. He can be a rim runner for LeBron. Maybe he works out there a little bit better than what he did with New Orleans, where kind of the spacing wasn't there. And obviously his 3-point shot with the Pelicans, was starting to come along. But, it's certainly not an aspect of his game that is too healthy at this stage. And so I think as a rim runner, as a shot blocker, maybe he can do something with the Lakers, but certainly not someone you want to be relying upon as your sole kind of backup for Anthony Davis. And they've got the likes of Rui Hachimura and Jared Vanderbilt, who at a stretch can be small ball fives maybe, but they're small ball fives. I'm not sure defensively for Rui Hachimura whether he's going to be holding up in that scenario. But we'll wait and see. Potentially those guys get some minutes as a small ball five. I just think the Christian Wood thing, I think if you're a Laker hater and you're trying to push a narrative of this is a not worthy pickup, and that you hate this pickup from a Laker perspective, then I think you're doing a disservice to yourself, because I just don't see how this is a negative for the Lakers. And again, I just have to look at it from a Warrior perspective. Would I have liked the Warriors to pick Christian Wood up on a $2.7 million contract? Absolutely. And I think most teams fans would be happy with that. Yes, you probably need to talk yourself into Christian Wood a little bit more than what you may like. But I do think that this is a pretty non-risky move for the Lakers, given the contract he's on. And I also just like the fact that now he gets to play under LeBron James. And that was always going to be the thing for me, is like he's never played with someone like LeBron or Steph Curry. And that's why I think a situation for him here at the Lakers, or if he were to, if he had have joined the Warriors, I think there's some optimism there that maybe he becomes a more impactful player to winning, playing with those all-time legends who are also fantastic leaders. So I think it's a good pickup for the Lakers. I think it's disappointing for the Warriors, and so now we have to look at what the next best option is. From a Warrior perspective, obviously less than 6 weeks out from training camp now, about 6 weeks now till the first game against the Suns, obviously on opening night at Chase Center. I do think that we should be getting some news here fairly shortly, if not about a 14th signing, about more training camp deals for players to try and fight for that 14th roster spot. I think at the moment we've got Jerome Robinson, who's a guard who is a great cultural fit at the Santa Cruz Warriors. He's not of any relevance, I think, with the 14th roster spot. I think he's the only one at the moment. Although there is the young big, I'll get his name in a second. Anyway, there's a young big from Santa Cruz. You're probably thinking of who I'm talking about right now. Played for the Warriors in Summer League. I've had a mind blank. I'll have a look at it in a second. Anyway, moving on. I don't think that the Warriors should be looking at any young guys. Like I've talked about Harry Giles. He's actually signed with another team now, so he's not an option. I don't think the Warriors should be looking at any young guys simply because they've already got Trace Jackson Davis there. I think it would be a little bit of overkill if you had another young big on the main roster alongside Trace Jackson Davis, and that you were trying to develop both players at the one time. I think that's not required. So I do think if they're going to go for a big here, which they're either going to go for a big or a wing, let's be honest, I still doubt whether Lester Quinones pushes his way onto the main roster as a 14th roster spot. I just don't think there's a need for that. When he's on a two-way deal already, he's signed to that. If he really finds a role or some rotation minutes during the regular season on a two-way contract, then there's always the option, if he forces the hand, to convert him to a standard contract on the main roster. Around the February trade deadline, a little bit after that, whatever it may be, like we saw with Anthony Lamb last season. So I think we're going to see a big here or a wing. I'd prefer a big. I've spoken about it all throughout the offseason. I just don't think that you should be going into the season with Kevon Looney as your only genuine big, and then Surridge as a small ball 5, Green as a small ball 5, and then Jackson Davis, who could emerge as an option for Steve Kerr, no doubt. But he's not someone as a rookie that you're going to be relying upon to say, hey, this guy can definitely give us rotation minutes this upcoming season. That's just not going to happen. So I do think that they need another big. So you're looking at some of the veteran options. Bismack Biyombo has obviously played most recently with Chris Paul, so is he an option? The likes of Tristan Thompson. The one I'm landing on, though, and the one I'm more firming towards if they were to go down this path, is Blake Griffin. And it's not an exciting option by any means for the Warriors, but I do think it's a solid option. I thought Blake Griffin showed enough with the Celtics last season to suggest that he's got something left to give in his NBA career and that it shouldn't be curtains for him quite yet. He only played 41 games, averaged 13.9 minutes per game. Look, whoever they sign with the 14th roster spot, you're not going to be bringing someone who's a guarantee or that you need to play, 15, 20 minutes a night. It is going to be someone that can play as an insurance depth piece in case you have injuries or potentially foul trouble. And I think Blake Griffin can be that guy. He shot 34.8% from 3-point range last season, which is steady enough. He averaged 3.8 rebounds in 14 minutes. Like, that's solid enough. He's an apt passer, and I think that's what you've got to look at here with the Warriors. Mike Dunleavy Jr. said, probably a couple of months ago now, it was soon after the signing of Dario Saric, that that we're not going to sign anyone simply for size reasons. We're not going to sign a 7-foot plus player if he can't fit into the Warrior style of basketball. And so I think there needs to be a little middle ground balance found here between finding someone with a little bit of size, but not necessarily going for just size primarily without thinking about how Steve Kerr and Golden State want to play. And I think that's what Blake Griffin can provide. He is 6'10", primarily been a power forward across the course of his career, but with the decline in athleticism, has found himself more as a 5-man over the last couple of seasons, firstly with Brooklyn and then the Celtics. He's really just another Dario Saric in terms of what he could provide offensively, a little bit of a floor spacer, not a huge 3-point shooting threat, but someone that you've got to at least respect. And he's an apt passer, and he could use his playmaking abilities. He's a solid screen setter. Defensively, I don't think he's doing too much for you, but he is a solid rebounder in that perspective. I just think, you could do with another Dario Saric, basically, because I don't think that I think Dario Saric is going to be a seamless fit offensively, but I think there's going to be nights where he won't be able to hold up defensively, and he could really hurt you in that aspect. So I don't think it's very fair to go into next season expecting that Dario Saric is going to be capable of playing 15 to 20 minutes every single game, which I think is what the Warriors are probably going to have to look at with their current roster as it stands, because you've basically got Looney, who we can probably say is going to play 23 to 25 minutes. So let's say he plays half a game, then that's 24 minutes remaining. How much are you going to give that to Draymond? I spoke about my kind of rotation minutes in the past few weeks. I wouldn't be giving Draymond any more than probably 9 or 10 minutes as a small ball 5. And then obviously you've got Saric in there as well, so that's asking him to play at least probably 15 minutes. And I think that's a big ask. Dario Saric is likely to be a great signing. He should be a seamless offensive fit, but he's still a minimum contract guy at the end of the day. He's coming off, he was fairly healthy last season, but he's still just a year removed from coming back from that ACL injury. So they definitely need to address their big man depth, and Blake Griffin is the one for me that's kind of firming as that guy who I would like the Warriors to sign. He had a plus 2.6 last season, which I know that's a team-orientated stat. It's not the be-all and end-all. I completely understand that. People will push back against that. However, I do think it does show that he can be capable of being in productive 5-man lineups, and you put him out there with Chris Paul, who has obviously got huge experience with in the past. Maybe it's Clay, Maybe it's Wiggins. Hopefully Kuminga can take a step. Maybe it's GP2. I'm just throwing names out here at the moment. But in terms of a second unit, maybe you have CP and Clay in the backcourt. Maybe you have GP2 and JK and Blake Griffin. And you can have that kind of lineup. And I just don't think that's going to be a disaster like we saw early last season with the Warriors. In terms of having Poole and JK and Moody and Wiseman all kind of mixing minutes there and playing quite a bit together in the second unit and really, really struggling, because that's going to be the important thing for the Warriors. And I think what they've addressed this offseason primarily is making sure that their bench is stable, that they don't have to overwork the likes of Draymond, Loon, Steph, Clay, even Wiggs to an extent. So I think it is important that they do address their center depth. And as I said, I think Blake Griffin still has something left to give in the NBA. I think Boston thinks so too. There's a recent report by Adam Himmelbach. I might have pronounced that wrong. I might have slightly forgotten the name. Someone from the Boston Globe reported that that Blake was that the Celtics were interested in bringing Blake back, but that Blake was unlikely to return, which makes sense given that they've obviously just acquired Kristaps Porzingis. They have him with Al Horford, with Robert Williams, who are all kind of center options. Obviously, a couple of those guys, Horford and Porzingis, will probably play more minutes at the 4. We'll wait and see how that works out. But either way, Blake Griffin's opportunities at the Celtics are going to be limited with those 3 guys, as injury prone as they may be. I think there's more chances for him to come to Golden State and try and earn minutes. I think it would be a scenario of, hey, we don't think you're going to be in the rotation regularly. You're probably just going to be an insurance piece for when Loon or Dre or Saric are in injury, have got injury issues, or if they're in foul trouble or something like that. But there's no reason why you can't say to him, hey, see what you can do in preseason during training camp. See if you can push yourself ahead of Dario Saric, which for someone like Blake Griffin, 5-time All-NBA player, 6-time All-Star, I think he'll still think that he's got the talent and ability to be a better performer than Dario Saric, for example. So we'll just wait and see how that plays out. But Blake Griffin, for me, is the player that I think the Warriors should target with their vacant 14th roster spot. And at worst, I think he's a strong locker room presence. The fact that the Celtics wouldn't mind having him back goes to show that I think culturally he's a pretty good fit for them. And I don't see why he couldn't be doing that for the Warriors there. I think with the Warriors either. I do think that he's clearly bought into a lesser role over the past couple of years, obviously with the injuries he's had since he's left Detroit, going to Brooklyn and Boston. I think he's been a strong locker room presence who's not going to be a negative in that regard. And as I keep saying, I think he's still got something left to give in the NBA. So NBA 2K24 is officially out. I think we're probably in the first couple of hours of launch in America, but obviously for me in Australia, been fortunate that we're now past the 19-hour mark since release. I was up late last night playing a little bit. I'm a big My Team player. Bit of controversy surrounding that game mode at the moment, but I won't talk about that here. Of course, we'll go through the Warrior player ratings here. I actually did an article on Blue Man Hoop a few weeks ago kind of predicting the ratings. So we'll go through each of them and see how I did and how they compare to the official ratings with 2K. So starting at the top, no surprises, Stephen Curry, who was last year a 96 and is this year a 96. And his rating was confirmed before I actually did a prediction. So I've got my predicted rating here as 96, but I already knew that. Cheated the system there. So not surprising. I think he's equal with 4 other players behind Nikola Jokic at 96 overall. I think he's been a 96 overall for the last 3 years now. So the consistency and excellence that Stephen Curry has produced over the last few seasons, even going into obviously entering this season at 35 years of age, his 15th NBA season, keeps aging like a fine wine, that is for sure. The second one was a really big surprise. So the second highest rated Warrior is actually Chris Paul. So obviously we know he's probably going to be the Warriors' 6th man this season, but that doesn't matter to NBA 2K right now, who have him as an 85 overall. Heading into 2K23, he was a 90, so it's a -5 drop. for CP3 based on last season's performances. I actually expected more than that. And the reason I expected more than that was because I thought that, hey, he can't be the Warriors' second best player rating-wise. He surely can't be. Well, he is. And I actually expected him to go down to an 82. But as I said, he's an 85. So that's probably the biggest shock out of all these ones, is the fact that Chris Paul is the second highest rated Warrior behind Steph Curry. Third, we have Klay Thompson, who I actually had dropping a point, I suppose, from 2K23. He was an 83 going into last season. He is now an 85. He's actually jumped up a couple. I had him at an 82, so I got that a little bit wrong. Pretty happy, I guess, for Klay to be an 85. I think that's pretty generous, to be honest, although he's, a guy who averaged 21.9 points per game last season on 41.2% shooting from three-point range. Draymond Green is next. He was an 83 going into 2K23. I predicted him to remain at that mark, and he has. So that was one that I got right. I think was a pretty simple one there. I think Draymond had a really solid, good year for the Warriors last season, but as I put in my article for Blue Man Hoop, I was going to be surprised if that was actually rewarded with a bump up in rating increase. Next one is Andrew Wiggins. This one's stiff. This one is really stiff. One of the most underrated players, I think, probably in the game from a 2K perspective. He was an 84, obviously coming off that 2022 playoff campaign where he was the Warriors' second best player. I had him in 83. Now, his form on the floor wasn't really any different last season. He was still a really quality, high-level two-way player. Obviously missed the 45 games in the regular season. Wasn't quite himself during the playoffs, although he did have that injury issue towards the end against the Lakers with the rib. But they actually dropped him 2 from an 84 to an 82, which is a little disappointing. I would have had him in 83, and I wouldn't have been surprised if they actually kept him at an 84, given his play during the regular season was still at a fairly high level. I just don't see Andrew Wiggins as the Warriors' fifth best player. In fact, for them to win a championship, I think he needs to return to being their second best player. So they've got him as the fifth behind Steph, CP, Klay, and Dre. Yeah, I'd need to have him. I think he's on par with Klay. And I would have my predicted ratings obviously had Dre and Wiggs at an 83 and Klay and CP both at 82s. So, yeah, I mean, make of that what you will, but I'm obviously incredibly surprised with Chris Paul's rating. Although maybe dropping 8 was never going to be realistic for me. I mean, he still had a pretty good season, obviously, for the Suns last season. I just, compared to Klay, Dre, and Wiggs, I thought CP would be kind of the bottom of that group, or maybe equal with Klay at an 82, but instead, those guys are both an 85. Anyway, we'll move on. Kevon Looney was the big improver here, no surprise. He was a 75 to start 2K23. I predicted him to bump up 4 to a 79. And he did with a 79. So that was another one that I'm happy to say that I got right. Well-deserved for Loon. He continues to basically improve year on year the way he's going. We know what he did in the playoffs for the Warriors, particularly against Domantas Sabonis and the Kings in the first round. So well-deserved. Hopefully we can see Loon take another rise here, because with the injury issues that he's had earlier in his career, obviously we're a few years removed from that now, but potentially he's still on the way up here. Like, he's 27, 28 years old. There's no reason why Loon can't take another jump here and potentially, for 2K25, get his rating up to an 80 or so. Jonathan Kuminga, he entered 2K23 with a 78. I expected him to bump up 1 to a 79 based on what he did during the regular season, where all his numbers basically went up across the board. He played a lot more minutes, more points, I think more rebounds, more assists, better percentages, both from the field and three-point range, I think.
Which one do you want to use to listen to this?
Okay, thank you, Siri. But instead, he went down a point from the 78 to a 77. I'm pretty disappointed with that. Maybe they took a little bit too much weight into his playoff performances that were zilch, because he got benched by Steve Kerr during the postseason. So I'm a little bit disappointed with that. As I'm just trying to turn Siri off there on my watch. Anyway, we'll move on. Gary Payton II. He was a 77 heading into 2K23. I predicted him to go down 1 just because of the injury issues he had. He wasn't exactly the same player when he returned late for the Warriors last season as he was in the championship season. So I thought a -1 was probably where he would be at. Instead, he's just remained at a 77. So not too far off, obviously. I'm happy with that mark from a 2K perspective, I think. Dario Saric, again, went down 1 in my books here. So he was a 76 heading into 2K23. I had him remaining at a 76, and he's gone down to a 75. I think that's slightly disappointing. I think for a guy coming off a major injury with the ACL, I think he was actually pretty good last season. Obviously did get moved from the Suns to the Thunder, but put up some reasonable-ish numbers, and numbers that I think deserve to remain at a 76 overall in 2K, but it is what it is. Corey Joseph, the other new Warrior acquisition via free agency, he's actually gone up 1. He was a 73 heading into 2K23. I predicted him to stay at a 73. Instead, he's gone up to a 74. Shot the ball pretty well from deep for the Pistons last season. Maybe that was an advantage there for him in bumping up 1. Moses Moody, a little bit disappointing here. Entered 2K23 as a 73 overall. I had him bumping up 1. His numbers weren't overly different from his rookie year. It was just disappointing that didn't take too much of a jump, obviously. But then what he did in the playoffs, I thought was important. And I don't see how you can drop Kuminga 1 spot because of his playoff performance, but then not raise Moody 1 because of his playoff performance. And so he's a 73. Stayed exactly the same, which based on the regular season, I'd be happy with, but I just thought that maybe his playoff performance, the fact he actually got genuine, meaningful minutes in the second round against the Lakers, I thought that might have been worthy, but it's probably just a speck in the season that 2K didn't really account for, which I can't be too upset with. Lester Quinones is not actually on the Play Now roster. Now, according to 2K ratings, he's a 67. I had him predicted a 68. Again, I'm not sure how official that is. I went onto the Play Now roster for the Warriors on the game and checked out all these ratings. He wasn't there, so I'm not exactly sure if that's the case or not. And then Brandon Podziemski and Trayce Jackson-Davis I got right. Wasn't overly difficult. Podziemski, as I said, predicted a 71, is a 71. Jackson-Davis, a 69, predicted as a 69. I think that this is a case of, I think 2K look at lottery picks maybe and kind of the next gen stars. And then from there, from pick 16 onwards, they're probably just rating players based on where they were drafted, because I think you could actually make the argument that Trayce Jackson-Davis heading into his rookie season should be rated above Brandon Podziemski. Like, he's a 4-year college player at 23 years old. I actually think that Trayce Jackson-Davis will probably have more impact on the Warriors if either of them do next season over Podziemski. The reason I predicted them as I did was because I knew 2K would do this. I knew that they were not going to care about Brandon Podziemski and Trayce Jackson-Davis, and that they were just going to rate them based on where they were drafted. And I think that's exactly what they've done. That's why Quinones is a 67 according to 2K ratings. You can make the argument that in terms of players that are going to have more impact on the Warriors this season, you can make the argument that Quinones is going to have more of an impact than Podziemski and Jackson-Davis. However, the 2K are clearly just saying that he's on a 2-way contract and rating him as such, which is maybe a little bit lazy, but there's so many players in the NBA. I don't know how critical we can be, and I don't think anyone's really caring, maybe apart from Warrior fans, on what Brandon Podziemski, Lester Quinones, Trayce Jackson-Davis 2K ratings are. Let's be absolutely honest here. So anyway, it's a often flawed system according to a lot of people in terms of 2K ratings. How much you want to buy into it, who knows? It is, I think, an interesting way at least to evaluate players and where they sit heading into a new season. I think 2K do a good job of updating players' ratings as the season goes along here, and obviously from a Warrior perspective, hopefully we can see a jump, particularly with a few of the younger guys, Moody and Kuminga particularly. Who knows? I'd like Kuminga to potentially get into the 80s maybe by 2K25 kind of thing, and Moody is certainly above 75 in the more 77, 78 range where Kuminga is at the moment. But other than that, guys, let me know your thoughts on the Warriors 2K ratings on Twitter. You can tweet me at POK252. That's POK252. If you're listening to this on YouTube, you can leave a comment down below. Please subscribe if you haven't already. Getting close to 50 subscribers. Would like to get well over that by the time the season heads around here. And of course, you can follow us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts as well. Other than that, enjoy the rest of your week. We'll have another episode within the next 48, 72 hours. Cheers.